All right. All right. Mic check. 1, 2. Are we on? Okay. So sorry about that. I had a little bit of some technical issues earlier on as I was trying to do the Rumble stream on the other one. So, as what we were saying, now we got full audio. Let's go into the co-main and main event of this card. So, we had Jan Blachowicz and Ankalaev with a draw. And then you had Patty Pimlet with a controversial decision. Now, what's interesting about this is that once again, Ankalaev persevered in the beginning of this fight in terms of taking those leg shots, those leg kicks that Jan Blachowicz was hitting him with. And I remember earlier in the fight, the commentary was praising how Jan Blachowicz was made out of steel of some sort. And that's the type of person that you're dealing with when you're in there with someone like him. If you saw him fought Dominic Reyes, it was very interesting to see the contrasting power that he had going into that fight, even before he got that knockout shot on Dominic Reyes. And that was something that Magomed Ankalaev had to deal with. Here's something really interesting that I've noticed about Magomed Ankalaev. He's not necessarily anybody that is extraordinary in his athletic uh, prowess. He's not like John Jones, who has a long length and has an explosivity about him. I mean, he's fast, he's strong, but he's not like NBA, NFL super athlete uh, type of strong or fast in that kind of matter. But it doesn't diminish the fact that he's dangerous because of his technical abilities and the way that he fights. It's very simple, but yet very methodical. And also, I think that if he hits you at the right place and at the right time, look, big guys are big guys. They're going to hit you and it's going to hurt. And then when they hit you and then when it hurts, you're going to feel it. And then it's going to affect how they're going to either dominate you in the fight or take you out of there. Now, the way that they scored this fight, I think it's fair enough considering that you had the earlier parts of the fight with Jan Blachowicz dominating, getting the leg kicks in, getting the shots in, but then later on, Ankalaev was able to adjust and adjust in ways that I think was very remarkable in his takedowns because Jan Blachowicz has stuffed 8 of his takedown attempts and Ankalaev only got 2. So you could understand why the judges would have scored this fight in that kind of matter, considering that Jan Blachowicz was showing that he was blocking the takedowns, but also had a dominant first or second round. And then some will argue that that was some sort of like 10-8 round in the first round or something to that extent. But the stats on Jan Blachowicz, he had 79 out of 141 strikes, which is 56%. And then Ankalaev had 300 shots that he took and only got 191 out of them. In a significant strikes department, Ankalaev had 78%, had 78 out of 184, which is 42%. And then Jan Blachowicz had 55 shots significantly out of 117, which was 47%, and had no takedowns. He didn't even attempt the takedown on Ankalaev, surprisingly enough. Now, out of nowhere in the 5th round, Jan Blachowicz falls. It was like as if, well, what happened here? It was like maybe his legs started hurting from all the shots that he was kicking him with. Because here's something a lot of people have to understand. Although, in theory, it seems like a good idea to do the leg kicks all the time, sometimes you could understand that you are going to take the full end of that stick in terms of taking the full end of that damage when you're the one kicking. That happens sometimes. You've seen it when Chris Weidman, I believe, was kicking Uriah Hall, and then out of nowhere, his leg snaps just from a block, just from checking the kick. And I think that had some effect on him, and then obviously he was getting a lot of those ground and pound shots from the bottom. Now with Paddy Pimblett and Jared Gordon, now the interesting aspect of this fight was that Paddy Pimblett mentions that in this day and age, it is the damage that wins fights. It's not so much of the takedowns and whatnot, which is what Jared Gordon had. He had three takedown. He had three takedowns out of six attempts, and Patty had three takedown attempts to which he had none. Now, the damage in terms of significant strikes, you could say that Patty may have had more of the strikes, but then the numbers don't um support that because Jared Gordon had a 69% strikes and out of 143 he was able to get 100 of those shots. Patty only 97 out of 194, which is basically 50% out of those shots. Not bad numbers if you're in boxing, because usually those guys make those other guys miss a lot, especially in the high professional realm of boxing. But in MMA, where there's a there's a grappling aspect involved in your striking, it's not gonna look that crisp or look that way in any kind of matter. And I think here's the thing: I've noticed that MMA Guru kind of criticized Paddy Pimblett's striking, and I can see and understand why. It's not very crisp, it's not very technical, and the numbers don't lie in that aspect when you see that he's getting hit this many times by Jared. Out of 100 strikes that he landed, 58 out of the strikes that he landed. But significant striking wise, it says here that Patty had 63 out of 155 versus the significant strikes with Jared with 58. So this is the reason why they scored the fight the way that they did. And we'll jump around the cards, but let's get to the Santiago Ponzinibbio fight against Alex Morono. Now, interestingly enough, Alex Morono was coming in here in a short notice, and the way that he fought, I think it's very conducive to somebody like himself who is somewhat of the type of fighter that's taking these fights at a short notice. He has a very good elusive movement about him. Now, when you have this type of fighting style, the same type of fighting style that you would see out of Tyson Fury, that you would see out of Prince Nassim, that you would see out of Dominic Cruz, not to say that these guys have ever taken a lot of short notice fights, but if they did, I think that they would do very well just based on the type of style that they have of being able to move around, having an elusive movement. This is something that Alex Morono showed in this fight. And he was winning this fight up until the third round of Santiago Ponzinibbio laying him out after getting outpointed throughout the entire fight, throughout the entire 3 rounds, and then coming back the way that he did in the same similar fashion as I have mentioned before with Carl Froch beating Taylor in the last round of the championship fight, while he was getting outpointed throughout the 11 rounds of the entire fight, only to come back the way that he did. Now, Darren Till, what a disappointing loss that he had going on tonight. Dricus du Plessis did really good in terms of neutralizing him with the takedowns. But then I had noticed that Darren Till looked either like he wanted to quit, or a part of it was he looked like he was just trying to conserve his energy. And in between the rounds, you notice that the PFL champion, Brendan Laughlin, told him that, like, man, listen, look at him across the cage right now, while they were sitting down in between the first and second round. He said he's out of it. He gave you all of the shots that he could, and then this is what happened. And then of course you could notice that Dricus was kind of slowing down during the fight as well, only for him to take Darren Till down again and submit him the way that he did. And once again, this is Darren Till's fifth loss out of 6 fights, which means that his last win was against none other than what's his name, Kelvin Gastelum. And where does Darren Till go from here? And look, you can argue that a lot of these guys in that weight division are just too strong for him, too wrestling heavy. Even Dricus tonight mentioned in the post-fight press conference, he doesn't think that Darren Till is an effective 185er. In fact, he thinks that he's too small for it. Now, weirdly enough, Dricus Duplessis is a former 170-pound KSW champion. And why is that significant? Because he was a welterweight going up to middleweight in the same similar fashion as Darren Till. The only difference is that he had mentioned all throughout those years that he made his body acclimate into 185 rather than Darren Till just going out there in that weight category with nothing but just gaining weight or not cutting weight or not implying yourself to the idea of having the right amount of strength for the right amount of size in the type of guys that you're going to compete with. Now, where does Darren Till go from here? Who knows? But is 170 a good bet? Maybe. But perhaps maybe he's just fighting a lot of these top guys that are just exactly that. You're going to lose to top guys. Let's take a look at some of the losses he's had. Derek Brunson, you had who else did Darren Till lose to? He lost to Tyron Woodley during his prime. And then you had who else did Darren Till lose to prior to that? So let's take a look at Darren Till's overall record here. He lost to Darren Till lost to Brunson, but he also lost to Robert Whitaker, which you can argue was none other than just a decision win for him, which is a very close fight. And then that kind of makes you think, in Dricus Duplessis' part, how would he do against somebody like Robert Whitaker? I'd say pretty well, just considering what we saw tonight. So Bryce Mitchell loses to Ilia Topuria. I mean, look, you got to understand something. Ilia Topuria is one of those guys that's hidden under the radar up until this fight that he had with Paddy Pimblett. Now, what's interesting about this is that Dana White was asked earlier tonight, is this fight ever going to happen? Because it seems that these two guys are constantly at each other's throats in every event. As what you notice in the last London card, he called him Mr. Hand Sanitizer because as Paddy was being confronted by Ilia Topuria, what does he do? He goes and picks up a hand sanitizer and throws it at Ilia Topuria. And then that's hence the name that he calls him by, Mr. Hand Sanitizer. And I've done that accent a few times when I was covering one of Paddy's fights at the conference call. So this is one of those situations where look at Paddy. He's not ranked. Now, Ilia Topuria is ranked 14. Perhaps he's going to be ranked a little bit higher after this Tuesday. But after this Tuesday, Paddy Pimblett is still not going to be ranked. But Paddy Pimblett has the $1 million barstool deal. He has all the media attention that he gets in Great Britain with BT Sport behind him. And then he has all these American fans in the San Diego area, which became his second home, creating this new persona for him. Plus, he has this blonde surfer look going on, even though he comes from this region of the world that's just really gangster. Now, here's something interesting I wanted to bring up about Liverpool, England, right? Because the interesting aspect about this is the way that the world perceives Paddy. They perceive him as somewhat of this innocent looking white boy from Liverpool, England, with blonde hair, and he looks like he could blend in San Diego based on the fact that he looks like a surfer. Well, let me tell you about his background and how his city is. So, Liverpool is one of the most unemployed places in London in the UK region. More unemployment than London, Manchester, Blackpool, all these cities combined. Edinburgh up in Scotland has the highest unemployment rate. However, they also have the number one Lexus dealership. Now, you got to ask yourself, how is this possible? And by the way, shout outs to Michael Duran. He told me about this. Um, and it's quite an interesting thing, right? And here's something I noticed too about people from Liverpool. Now, if you notice the two clubs that they have, Everton and Liverpool FC, the one that Mohamed Salah plays for. Interestingly enough, they're both sponsored by Western Union. Now, what is Western Union? It is a company that sends money across the world by, I guess, a MoneyGram order, or if, let's say, you want to send money to someone and you can't do it through a bank account, this was one of their ways to do that. Now, why is that significant? Because Liverpool people, I've noticed also, are some real serious travelers. They're all over the world. You have Liverpool people that live in Thailand because they did something back home and then they had to go run away. And by the way, look at Darren Till's story. One of his most interesting stories about his life and his career was that he had to go down to Brazil because of the little stabbing that he had going on in Liverpool and his coach telling him to do that. And interestingly enough, where is his coach in the middle of this? His head coach that he has, Colin, he wasn't in this camp, and Kamzat wasn't in this camp either. Now, interestingly enough, as the fight was going on with Darren Till and Dricus du Plessis, I had noticed that while he was trying to drain out Dricus, it kind of worked because you noticed that in the second round, he was able to uh, unload his striking only for Dricus to take him down again. And it looked like it was working for a minute. But here's something that I noticed that I think Darren should have done. I think he should have came at this fight with a little bit more offensive wrestling. Why? Because it's obvious that Dricus is the stronger wrestler. But it doesn't mean that just because he's the stronger wrestler or maybe even the better wrestler, it doesn't mean that you have to just settle for that. Now, if he was to be an offensive grappler or an offensive wrestler in this matter, in terms of taking initiatives to go for takedowns and whatnot, I think that he would mix up a lot of things in his arsenal and maybe would confuse Dricus a little bit. Now, here's something that George St. Pierre did really great back in the days. One of the things that he did great was that he was able to mix up his striking and wrestling and create a performance paralysis in his opponent if he needed to. In other words, if he was fighting somebody that was a great striker, what does he do? He goes and wrestles them. He uses wrestling as a counter to their striking, meaning that if, let's say, Thiago Alves was going to go throw a kick, what does he do? He goes and shoots for a single leg, catches that leg, goes for a double leg takedown, kind of like a spear that you've seen Goldberg do back in the WCW days. In other words, if they would try to go for a swinging hook or some kind of winding shot of some sort, he would change his levels and go for the wrestling. Now, this is very contrasting to the current fighting generation of this era because you have guys like Conor McGregor who's focused, and not necessarily focused, but you notice that they're experts in this one particular style of fighting. In other words, Conor is an expert striker. So he's not going to do offensive wrestling with you. Paddy Pimblett, in other words, is also a very offensive grappler. He's going to try to take your back. He's going to try to take you down. If he's in the right position, he's going to try to fight off your back and then grab a submission if he can. And he's going to commit offense in that kind of way. But when it comes to striking, maybe it's not as crisp as what I had mentioned earlier. And then these guys are just not doing that same philosophy that George St. Pierre does in terms of rounding themselves out. Now, I had noticed the reason why Francis Ngannou is the heavyweight champion of the world today is because he applies all these things. A lot of people were surprised that he goes and out wrestles Cyril Gane in this fight. Well, I'm thinking, you know what? What is he going to do? Cyril Gane is a very high level striker. So, of course, he's going to use the wrestling skills that he never had before when they were training partners together and they were sparring together. So now he's showing these new wrinkles in his game. So I just thought I'd make a comment about that while I was going on a tangent about people in Liverpool. So in other words, yeah, it's really interesting that Liverpool guys, they are experienced in worldwide gangsterism, for lack of a better term. I mean, it is just a gangster place where they come from. You got to also understand the Beatles come from that place also. So I think that Paddy is garnering this aspect of Liverpool of being this top G, but also coming from this place of worldwide known entertainers such as the Beatles, combining all that, which is the reason why he has that $1 million deal with Barstool Sports and with the likes of Ilya Tapora. He's one of the top 15 guys in the world and in his weight class, but he doesn't have the same notoriety that Patty has. Because once again, like I said, come Tuesday, Patty is still going to be unranked, and Dricus Duplessis is, I'm sorry, not Dricus Duplessis, Ilya Tapora is going to be uh, cracking into the top 10 of some sort, or just right under the top 10. So he dominated that entire fight against Bryce Mitchell, and two undefeated guys coming in here, two undefeated guys that is in the UFC, only for Ilya Tapora to get the submission. And I'm telling you, man, he's very underrated. This is one of those guys that floats under the radar. And here's an interesting story about Ilya Tapora and the beef with Patty Pimblett. So what you have here is the classic story of the haves and have-nots. So you see a lot of the famous fighters that you guys support out there in the world. I can tell you right now, there's a lot of your favorite fighters, a lot of fan favorite fighters that on any given day would get their butt whooped by these guys in random gyms around the world that just have not gotten their shot yet, that have not gotten their turn yet. And I remember back in the days, I was watching the old school UFC where they had these, I guess, highlight shows of some sort. This was in the days when they were in Versus and Spike TV, where they asked Forrest Griffin about, like, yeah, would you fight, unknown guys or this and that? And then he basically mentioned, yeah, you know what? The thing with these unknown guys is that they just haven't came up yet. So you just don't know how they are and what you're going to expect when you're fighting these people. So another guy on the card, Raul Rojas Jr. and Jay Parent. Now, interestingly enough, he showed exactly what he was made of and what he does best. And once again, another one of these guys that shows that he has the one-dimensional skill of grappling. We don't know much about his striking yet in terms of how he's going to deal with that in the higher levels. But so far, you see that the kid's main base is grappling, and he did exactly that. He choked out Jay Perrin after Jay Perrin talked trash to him the whole entire time, the whole entire build-up, the whole entire fight week. And it resulted to this. And Jay Perrin has been on a losing streak as of late. So he had to make something out of this. But what's interesting enough is here's something that I've noticed between Raul Rojas Jr. and Patty Pimblett tonight. They both are playing their heel role, or the perception of how the public views them. And what do I mean by that? Well, this whole scandal during the week that Patty Pimblett has had with Ariel Helwani, and I'm not going to go into it. You guys can look that up. You can pause this right now, go look at that, or if you can't pause it, just wait till the end of this live and see what is going on with the little debacle he has going on with Ariel Helwani and the beef that he has going on with journalists. But nonetheless, it just made Patty look really bad in that type of sense. And also, a lot of people thought that Patty was a liar for basically mentioning that he trained with Jared Gordon, and Jared Gordon claims that they've never once trained together at all. Or maybe Patty may have confused him for somebody else. But nonetheless, he's playing into that heel role, because now a lot of people are booing Patty, or not really feeling what Patty is doing. So he's moving into that role. He's saying, yeah, I'm the top G, or this and that. I won this fight. There's no way in God's green earth you could say that I didn't win this fight. And he's playing into that. Whereas in contrasting nature of Jan Blachowicz, he was claiming that Ankalaev won the fight, give him the belt. Even though that the judges scored it a draw, he felt in his heart that he won the belt. And even Joe Rogan agrees with him in that, and many other people as well. Not just Ankalaev fans, but maybe even the fans of Jan Blachowicz agreed to that. But certainly Jan Blachowicz agreed that he lost the fight. Whereas with Paddy, in the controversial decision that he won, he is not going to give you any room of nullification against him to any degree. So he's playing into that. Now, Raul Rojas Jr., his post fight was amazing. Why? He said after the fight, I want Dana to give me a minivan so my mom can go drive me to the PI center. Now, why did he say that? He said that because he knows that in your mind, you're thinking he is a kid, he's a young kid, so he's going to play into that and make a comedy skit out of it. So I thought that was brilliant that he came out and said that. And 18 years old, where does this kid go from here? I mean, it's sky's the limit. We've never seen an 18-year-old compete in the UFC like this, not since the likes of Vitor Belfort, where he came in here during the bare knuckle days and just messed everybody up in the open weight tournament at 18 years old. Rosenstruck then finishes Chris Daukaus in the first round within 23 seconds. Chris Daukaus literally got one shot into that fight, like some sort of hook, only for Rosenstruck to counter with some kind of straight shot and then take him down to the ground. And then that was that. He bum rushed him in the same very similar fashion that Francis Ngannou bum rushed him. But this is the heavyweight division. Sometimes that works out one way or the other. And then Edmund Shabazian comes in with a second round TKO win, a well needed win after a few losses that he's had, taking a year off, now coming back into the mix, honing his skills throughout that year, now training with a new camp in Randy Couture's gym in Extreme Couture in Vegas. I think did him some good tonight. And then Chris Curtis gets the upset against Joaquin Buckley. And Joaquin Buckley was just coming off of the Joe Rogan podcast. And interestingly enough, it seems that Joaquin Buckley is going to be looked at as one of these guys that's what you could say is a one-hit wonder. He had that one kick that he had against that African guy in Abu Dhabi, that kick where he kicks and then that guy catches the kick and then he goes and throws a spinning back kick in the middle of it, which went completely viral. Even Trump and Kanye shouted that entire thing out when that thing happened. So it went viral. And then to this, hey, that's the reality of fight game, right? It's the theater of the unknown. You never know what's going to happen. So all throughout the card, then you had Cameron Simon with a third round finish earlier in the night. TJ Brown with a submission in the third round against Eric Silva. And then Alexander Hernandez losing to Billy Quarantello in the second round at 4:30 of the second round. So that basically concludes the entire card. Now, what are some takeaways that I would like to explain about this card? As I mentioned in the video that I had uploaded regarding the two contrasting aspects of this co-main and co-main event. Well, it showed not so much in the fights, because like I said earlier in that video, that people like Patty and Jared Gordon are giving people the easy way out. And it's not that they mean to. These guys mean well. They understand their role in this world of people that look up to them. They understand their role in terms of using this platform for good, for raising mental health awareness. But I could be wrong, and Allah knows best. Okay? This is just my opinion. I do believe that they allow some kind of aspect of quitting in people, whereas that's not something that's present in the Eastern Bloc of Europe, in terms of the Polish, in terms of the Chechens, the Dagestanis, the Russians, the Romanians. The list goes on to Ukrainians. This is not the mentality that they have. They're going to go and fight on no matter what. Now, these two contrasting ideas, it didn't matter that night, because all four of these men showed their perseverance no matter what, showed what they could do when it was crunch time, showed what they are capable of when they're being pushed to the limit. Because let's face it, this was one of Patty's toughest fights in the UFC thus far. And that is something that you can't deny. It's one of his top opponents that he's had so far in the UFC. And same thing with Jan Blachowicz. He's had a very tough fights. He's had tough fights before, but I think this was one of the tougher fights for Ankalaev, and he showed exactly the same thing of what happens when your back is against the wall only to come back and persevere. But that is the reality of combat sports because it's a theater of the unknown and you never know what's going to happen, including draws and unexpected controversial decisions. Enjoy the fights.